Hay Festival.
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 Bienvenidos al podcast Hay Festival 2025, un espacio para imaginar otro mundo.
Bienvenidos al podcast 2025, la edición especial del podcast del Hay Festival en español, en el que celebramos el 20º aniversario de nuestro festival en Cartagena de Indias. Soy Catalina Gómez Ángel.
Y yo, Iñaki La Setura. Para celebrar este momento único, le pedimos a nuestros seguidores que nos enviaran las preguntas que consideraban eran claves para entender el mundo en el que vivimos.
Después de un largo ejercicio, nuestro equipo ha seleccionado las 20 preguntas más significativas y para responderlas reunimos algunas de las mentes más brillantes y más expertas en cada tema que participaron en la más reciente edición del festival en Cartagena en enero de 2025. Empecemos, Iñaki.
Estamos hoy con Marcus du Sautoy, que es profesor en Simón para la comprensión pública de la ciencia y profesor de matemáticas en la Universidad de Oxford. Es autor de 6 libros, incluyendo su más reciente obra, The Creativity Code. Ha presentado numerosas series de radio y de televisión, incluyendo una de televisión de 4 partes para BBC llamada The History of Maths.
Marcus du Sautoy, welcome to our podcast. And the first question, should we be afraid of artificial intelligence?
This is a question on many people's minds at the moment, so I'm not surprised it's one of the 20 questions that people wanted to ask here at the festival. And with any new technology, there's always positives and negatives, but my feeling is that the negatives have been really dominating in the media. So I think there's a lot of fear about this new technology, that it's going to take over our jobs, that it's going to wipe out our species. And I think this is slightly fueled by Hollywood, because Hollywood loves a story about how robots or Terminator or artificial intelligence is going to wipe us out. But I think I'm much more optimistic. I see this as a really powerful new tool to help humans do things better. And of course there are dangers and we need to be aware of those, but I think we also need to celebrate what this technology can help us to do. For example, last year the Nobel Prize was awarded to the use of artificial intelligence to help find new medicines, new therapeutics for degenerative diseases. And without this technology, we would never have made these breakthroughs. So I like to compare artificial intelligence a little bit to when Galileo got a telescope. And Galileo suddenly was able to see things deep into our solar system that we'd never seen before, that we couldn't see with our naked eye. And I think artificial intelligence is like a telescope into the digital world. It will help us to see patterns and information and messages in data that without this tool we would never be able to find. And we live in a very data-rich world. Lots of data about medicine, lots of data about the climate, lots of data across everything. And this is a tool that will help us to understand that data and hopefully do things better, like finding new medicines or new solutions to helping the climate turn away from the overheating that we're seeing. So yes, there are dangers, and I recognize that, but I think my message is that we need to also look at the positives.
One of those dangers could be the inequalities, and it's how can we ensure that artificial intelligence does not exacerbate these existing inequalities?
I think there are 2 parts to this question. One is the worry about bias in data, that quite often the artificial intelligence is just accentuating bias that's already there. And we have to recognize that's not artificial intelligence's fault, it's humans' fault, because the bias is there because of human bias. And that again is where there could be a positive to this, because Artificial intelligence is a little bit of a double-edged sword. For example, deep fakes, it can create incredible copies of people doing things. But on the other side, it's very good at spotting deep fakes. When we're taken in as humans and we think that's somebody saying something, it's able to actually identify those fakes. And it's the same with bias, that artificial intelligence used well will actually help us to identify bias in the data. So it's again, with any tool, it's how you use that tool. With understanding how the atom works, we can blow the planet up using that technology, or we can solve our energy problems and sort out climate change by using nuclear power. It's what you do with that information. And for me, I think that's the role of my job in Oxford, the professor for the public understanding of science, is to make society aware and empower society to understand how to use these scientific developments for the benefit of humanity. Now, the other thing about inequality is interesting because who has access to artificial intelligence? Who has access to computers to be able to capitalize on this? And again, you might say, well, no, it's going to be the rich countries that have access to all of this technology. But I also think that there's a lot of use of, for example, mobile phones in Africa to allow people to do micro financial transactions more easily. So this technology is getting cheaper. The way to access it, there's a lot of open source material. So it could actually, again, be something that empowers many communities that before didn't have the power to use this technology. So it's, again, how we use it. There's clearly a lot of artificial intelligence is concentrated in a few companies at the moment that have access to large amounts of data. That is key to making this technology. If you have the data, you can create the algorithms that can capitalize on that. No. But we are hoping to get more sort of open source data, and then more people can be involved.
Now we are coming to the next question that is related with misinformation. Can we fight against misinformation? And of course, this question comes related with algorithms that looks like they dominate our life. Can we combat misinformation?
I find this a very depressing period for the fact that we felt like we were making progress with understanding the power of vaccines, for example, to help society. But the power of misinformation to lead people astray from what the evidence is, I think has really taken us back in the last 10, 15 years. And so I think this is a very important question. How do we counter these false narratives that people are peddling? And how do we know which one is false and true? How do I know that I know the truth about vaccines and somebody else doesn't? And we have to go to the evidence, to the data, and not to the emotion and the story. So, but it's difficult because emotion and storytelling. Here we are at the Hay Festival. The power of a story to capture people's imaginations is what is so powerful about literature and this festival. But a story can really corrupt, and so one has to use stories carefully. So, as a scientist, I would say the best way to counter misinformation is to present the data. Show people what a vaccine, how many lives a vaccine can save. Show people the data for the heating up of the climate. But unfortunately, that isn't a good way to communicate a story. Data, for many people, they switch off. So I think as scientists, we have to do something quite unscientific, which is to combine explaining the data to the public with also telling a story which may be just one data point, so actually meaningless in scientific terms, but incredibly significant for somebody who doesn't have a scientific background. One story about a child who dies because they didn't have the measles vaccine is very powerful. that will counter all of those people who are saying, but that vaccine, we think, caused autism in our children. Scientifically, one person's story is not important. It's the whole collective story. But I think in scientists, in order to counter this misinformation, we have to understand, to overturn one story, we need to tell another story.
It's the power of personal histories that
Yes,
they are very powerful.
Yes, if unscientific.
And in your last work, you talk about creativity too. And our followers also have asked about creativity because they ask what role does art play in building a more peaceful, empathetic society that it is aware of these challenges?
This is a lovely question because in my book, The Creativity Code, I explore what is creativity and why is it so important to our species. And I rather liked Carl Rogers, the psychologist's kind of take on creativity, that he believes it was the tool that our species developed as our consciousness began to emerge. That as we became conscious as a species and we had our own internal world, and then we wondered whether our fellow humans also were experiencing pain, love, ecstasy in a similar way, we needed tools to explore both what's happening inside ourselves and also in the mind of the other. And Carl Rogers suggested that maybe at the same time as consciousness, maybe creativity and art emerged as a very powerful tool to understand ourselves and understand the mind of the other. So I think in this day and age when it's so important, we have so many disparate groups, so many different societies, cultures, to understand each other, the power of art, the power of story, the power of creativity is crucial in helping us to build the bridges to understand how a different society thinks and get into the mind of the other. So I think that is why art is so strong, because it is very often a powerful language. And language is interesting because sometimes words are not good enough to understand the mind of the other. Maybe it's a music, which is a completely different access to the brain, or maybe it's visual art. So we've developed all of these tools to try and create an empathy amongst our species.
Unfortunately, the time is over. We have so many other questions that will fit and we would like to discuss with you, but the time is very short. Thank you for being with us in our podcast in the Hay Festival en español, that we imaginamos otro mundo. Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros en este podcast del Hay Festival en español. Imaginamos otro mundo.
Well, thank you for your fascinating questions.
Our readers.
From the readers, absolutely.
Gracias por acompañarnos. Una producción de Ojo por Ojo Multimedia. Hay Festival 2025. Un espacio para que imaginemos otro mundo.